Hi, this is Lady Cee.
And this is JT.
And in our upcoming segment of The Critical Thought, we're going to be interviewing Wes. He is a mental health therapist. He's got his master's in psychology, and he has 20 years' experience counseling adolescents with issues.
You're listening to The Critical Thought, where we challenge our listeners to use critical thinking when examining the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Wes, welcome to The Critical Thought.
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome, and we are very interested in hearing your story. In your family, how many people in your family are Jehovah's Witnesses?
Currently 3, my parents and my wife.
Wes, what is your background with the Jehovah's Witness religion?
My mother got baptized in 1975 and my father in 1980. And so they're still in the organization. And my grandmother, who passed last December, she was baptized in 76, and no siblings in the organization.
And do they know what your current situation is and how you feel about the organization?
My parents don't. I tried to talk to them about it, and they just, pretend like they didn't hear me. But my wife, she knows. I tried to share with her information that I was discovering during my research in the beginning, but she didn't, catch on to it or didn't want to hear about it too much, so I kind of slowed that down. And so now every once in a while I'll bring something up. But well, she was raised in the organization. Her mother and her sister are still in the organization, so that's pretty much all she's known. She's never been outside the organization.
Okay. So basically, how did you feel growing up in the organization, and how did it affect your outlook towards life?
Well, I felt that it was a restriction and a constriction, and especially growing up with a father that was eventually, he became an elder, but I was very interested in sports, and I had, coaches calling my parents asking me to participate in sports ever since the 5th grade, and I kept getting the response that it was bad association, so I wasn't able to participate to their knowledge. It had gotten to a point where I think the 8th grade, I would sneak away and go to practice or go to the football games and participate without my parents' knowledge. And fortunately, those games were on Fridays and our meetings were on Thursdays, so they never found out about that.
Wow, interesting. So what days was practice?
Practice was Monday, Wednesday, and Saturdays.
Now, did your parents allow you to hang out with people that were not Jehovah's Witnesses?
Well, that's what was so confusing about the bad association label put on playing sports, is that those same kids that were playing sports were in the neighborhood, and they put no restriction on me playing with them after school.
Okay, but then they said when you wanted to play sports, like formally play sports, then all of a sudden it became bad association.
Correct.
Did your parents ever discover that you were playing?
Not until I went off to college.
Okay.
The restriction with the bad association was also, I couldn't spend a night over anybody's house or anything, but when we were just outside playing, it was okay. But as far as hanging out with them, so-called worldly kids, that was a restriction on that. I had to sneak and do things like that also.
Did you have any brothers or sisters, or were you only child?
No, I have a younger sister.
Did she ever decide to do anything?
No. She never decided to get baptized or anything, and I just, spoke to her a few minutes ago, and I was telling her about this interview, and she is so far away from the organization and critical of it, and she thinks it's a cult, and she's just completely, as my father said, disappointed him.
Oh, yeah, that's what they say. What did she ever do since she didn't accept it? Did she go off to college? go into a profession of some type?
We both did. We were raised in the 70s and 80s when it seemed like it was a lot of public talks and a lot of magazines, saying not to go to college, just pioneer, go to a trade school. But for some reason, we just never bought into that. We both have our master's degrees. She works in the medical field. And one impact that those restrictions had, especially on her, is that with her kids, she let them do anything as far as if they wanted to play sports or be in the marching band or cheerlead. She made sure that she was, allowing them to do that just for the simple fact that we couldn't do that.
Oh, yeah. At what point do you think she realized this wasn't the truth, though?
I think when she left home to go to college at the age of 18, I think that's when her eyes start opening up. And over the years, she's seen how things in the organization have played out. And she sees how my parents, how deep they are in the organization. And then with the passing of our grandmother last year because of the blood transfusion issue, she completely, that was the last straw for my sister right there.
So your grandmother needed some type of blood therapy?
Well, she had a stent put in last October, and she was 89, and they offered to her, or said she needed about a pint of blood, a pint and a half, and she would fully recover. Well, she didn't accept it. And towards the end, she had gotten real weak. Her organs were failing and everything. But towards the end, the night that she passed, she was, out of it. And the doctor asked my mother and my uncle, should they give her blood? And they turned it down, and she ended up passing on that night. So that affected my sister and some of my family that's, not in the truth. And what really added insult to injury with my aunts that's not in the truth is that my mother listened to the elders, elders that come to the hospital. I forgot the name.
Hospital Liaison Committee.
Right. And she was taking advice from them instead of listening to the advice of the doctors.
Oh, yeah. That blood has really messed a lot of families up. And
right.
That's one of the reasons why the society had to shift it from disfellowshipping to disassociation, because it comes with so many legal ramifications when you have it as a disfellowshipping offense.
Yeah, I was telling Lady Cee earlier that by my wife being in the truth, I don't want, if something happened to me, I don't want my parents to influence her on the blood issue. So I'm going to have some papers drawn up to give that right to my sister, that if something happens to me, I do want blood if that's necessary.
Yeah, I know, and you will need to do that because they're very, very sincere. They mean well, but I'm telling you, man, in another 5, 10, 15 years, when the society finally decides to drop the whole blood issue and say it's a conscience matter or whatever, man, it's going to be some messed up people in this organization. It's going to be some messed up people in this organization.
You're correct on that.
Oh yeah. I mean, because we personally know people who have lost parents and stuff like that because they didn't take the blood fractions that were banned at the time, and now they're okay to take. And now, of course, their parents are dead, and so that whole the society basically got in over their head with the blood, and now they're in so deep they can't get out. That's the
right.
basic problem. Yeah,
and it's hard to reason with people on that issue because I try to reason with my mother on that issue, and even though I told her that it's in the Bible it was about their meals, kosher meals when they were talking about draining the blood of the animal and everything, but blood transfusions didn't come into existence until the late 1800s. So there is no way that the Bible was talking about not having blood transfusion.
And that will probably be the explanation that the society will use. One day you will get a magazine, and it's going to say, I'll better understand. We Reexamine it. our better understanding was it only applied to kosher foods, and they're gonna just move right on, and and everybody gonna be sitting there like, huh, what?
Right. Right. The same thing with disfellowshipping. I had my wife last night watch a documentary by Leah Remini, the actress, about Scientology, and they were talking about shunning.
Yep.
And so I asked her, isn't that the same thing that the organization does? You know, I had to explain to her, why be part of an organization or a group that destroys family? And, you know, if Jehovah's a God of love, he can't approve of families being destroyed and people committing suicide because they've lost their family and friends. And it's just a mess. It's a correlation between Scientology, their methods, and the organization's methods of shunning.
Yeah, it's pretty bad because it shows you what happens when you feed people a certain diet. How did you personally what started you on the path of being willing to re-examine things? We find that almost every single Jehovah's Witness at some point has a question or has a doubt on something, and because of the way the organization is structured, there are so many firewalls set up that this organization has in place via the meetings, publications, talks, and just the friends themselves that will check you. And as a result, it makes people push things to the back of their mind, and you literally believe if you dwell on this thing that you have a question about, it means that you're not spiritual or you don't love God. And so by default, you just push it to the back of your mind. But what was it that you ran across, you saw, you heard, or experienced that made you take a second step and like, let me re-examine this again?
Well, it was two things. The first thing is the new light. My thing is, if Jehovah is feeding his sheep, he's going to get the information right the first time. So every time you come up with a new light, that's saying that, you know, Jehovah changed his mind. So I kept hearing this new light, and it just didn't make sense to me. Why do you have to go and edit, you know, doctrine? And the second thing was the new generation. You know, it's like they playing like moving the ball, moving the goalpost.
Yep.
You know, it's this generation won't play out, and then, you know, time goes on, and so they move it a little bit further. And I've been hearing this is the end of this system since I was 7 years old when my mom came into the truth.
Yep.
So, or organization. So when people say, well, this is happening and that's happening and this is happening, well, those things have always happened. Yep. They happened during biblical times when it was written about it. So we're no closer to the end of that system than we were 20 years ago. The internet is the worst thing to ever happen to religion because,
yes, it is.
See, when I was growing up in the truth and a teenager, you know, we couldn't verify what was being said. But now you can just pull out your phone during a meeting and research what's being said. So that's the worst thing now because people just don't believe everything you tell them. Most people don't.
Until they Google it.
I always say, right. Until
they Google it. Yeah, the internet for a high control group or for what people refer to as a cult, the most powerful thing that they have in their favor is their members have a lack of information. Mm-hmm. And that goes directly against what the internet is all about. The internet is all about, in fact, the internet also has too much information. How to build a bomb in your basement tonight in 2 hours. Right. You know, so they got everything. Right. That internet has everything that people can have, good or bad. And so, like you said, for religion, it's really, really bad, especially high control groups. I mean, because religion is pretty much, religion in general, they're either high control or low control. In other words, they dictate a certain aspect of your life. And the only thing that really separates them, if you really look at it, is to the level and the degree. I mean, some go right down to the type of clothes you can wear, the type of cars you can drive, the type of jewelry you can wear. I mean, they just whether you can wear makeup. I mean, they just get right down to the minutia. And and then others, they give you the ability to choose more things. A typical Jehovah's Witness cannot choose his career. It's just that simple.
Well, I know all my life I've heard about, and I'm pretty sure you heard this also about, being careful of what you read and don't read outside material. And now since the internet is so prevalent, don't look at nothing or research anything if it's not on JW.org. Well, that's one of the trademarks of a cult, of a controlled organization. Keep everything contained.
Yeah. In fact, if you go on JW.org right now and you go to the library of publications and books, you can see that they're already starting to do that, because you cannot research anything older than 2000.
Right.
And that is on purpose.
Well, they also indoctrinate you when you're a young child in the truth, organization rather. They put it in your mind about independent and critical thinking. That's a no-no, because they're scared you're going to do like I did and like many others and research something. Yeah,
that was one of the things that my wife and I did when we went to college. Is the very first class we took was a psychology class, the first class. And the reason why, because we wanted to understand how could people who otherwise are very reasonable, sound, not irrational, how is it they could be convinced to do the things that we were convinced to do? And, you begin to understand how conditioning works, Pavlov's dog, cognitive dissonance. You begin to see how those things work, and you see how the society employs those same techniques. Jehovah's Witnesses are almost if you were to look at Jehovah's Witnesses, it's almost as if they are a control group. The governing body has put certain limitations on what will be allowed and what will not be allowed, and this way you can get the results that you want. But you have to have a control group, and we are that controlled group, and that's why they get the results that they want.
One of the ways to control, too, is that you keep saying the same thing. You keep feeding the same things to the people. You repeat it over and over and over. And it's things that, that's one way of mind control. It's things that I heard as a teenager that they're still talking about now. They're regurgitating all that information. So if you're sitting there 2 or 3 times a week for years and you keep hearing the same things over and over, it's like they're saying, if you keep telling the same line over and over, sooner or later you'll believe it yourself.
You'll believe it, yeah. I mean, it is amazing. And this is just my personal observation. I think that African Americans are impacted even greater, because one of the things that the organization does, and I tell people all the time, the Watchtower has probably the best package than any religion in the world, because when you knock on a person's door, it doesn't matter what their condition is, you have an answer for it. If you have no legs, you'll get them in a new system. If you can't see, you'll get it in a new system. If you're old, you become young in the new system. You lost somebody in death, they'll be back in the new system. So it doesn't matter what the person's problem is. It's like a snake oil salesman. You got something in your bag that will take care of it. And the basic problem is that it's almost like timeshare. I say people all the time, it's like a Jehovah's Witness timeshare for week 53. The brochure looks real nice, but you never get to use the timeshare because you're waiting for week 53. And week 53 never shows up. Never shows up.
Right. And when you're studying, they never tell you the bad side. You get all the love bombing when you first start going to the hall, but then once you get baptized or you get involved in the congregation, you start seeing people gossiping about you or gossiping about somebody else, and they never tell you when you're studying that if you slip up, we're going to take your family or friends from you and force you to come back.
No,
they never tell you that kind of stuff.
You never get there on the Bible study. That's never on the Bible study. Now, were you ever appointed as a ministerial servant or an elder in your congregation?
I was appointed a ministerial servant. That was about 3 years ago, and coincidentally, maybe about 6 months after I was appointed, I started doing my research. I read Christ Was a Conscience, And I read a couple of other books, and then I started gradually reading things and looking at YouTube channels. That happened, almost immediately after I was appointed.
Wow.
All my life I heard that elders and ministerial servants were, and circuit overseers and everything were appointed by Jehovah first, that you were chosen because of Jehovah, Holy Spirit. But I started seeing that it's more so who you know, who your family is, how long you've been in this congregation, whose ring have you kissed. It's more political than,
yes, it is.
Jehovah's Holy Spirit. And I know of people now that's elders that, it's because of the kissing the ring. And I know that they couldn't possibly be appointed by Jehovah's Holy Spirit.
What people eventually will reach as they keep examining, you'll reach the point where I personally I'm at right now. You begin to realize that we actually were simply just working for a book publishing company. And exactly. It just so happens that they produce religious genre publications, and our responsibility was to move their products. And they provide us with all kinds of titles and positions, auxiliary pioneer, special pioneer, regular pioneer, special full-time service. They have all these different rankings, just like you in Amway. You're diamond, double diamond, triple diamond, emerald, pearl. It's all the same thing. And with each position comes privileges, status, and honor.
And the answer to everything is field service. Like when I was being considered for a ministerial servant or whatever, it was increase your hours in field service. I was already, working a full-time job and getting at least 10 hours a month, but that wasn't enough. And, if you're having financial problems, well, go out and field service more. And, people with mental health issues or domestic violence issues, they'll come to the elders or something, and they say, well, maybe you're not out in field service enough, or maybe you're not, getting enough hours or praying enough or studying enough. That's not the answer to everything, field service time. That seems like, that's just free labor for the publishing company.
I remember at my elder school, the instructor was a Bethelite, very well-respected African-American guy, very, very prominent. He's on one of the corporations now. He was on the personnel committee. He's how you actually got accepted to Bethel. He reviewed your application to come to Bethel. And at our elder school, he asked the elders, he said, would you brothers like to be able to deal with 85 to 90% of your problems? He says, I want you to write this down. And so everybody gets their pencil sharpened, gets that piece of paper out. They're going to write down the solution, the secret to how to get rid of 85% of your problems that you have as an elder. And he said, when you're dealing with the friends, you ask them these three questions. Sister Jones, are you regular at the meetings? Then that could be the problem why you're having. Sister Jones, are you keeping up with the reading of all your publications? Are you up to date on your magazines, your Wake and everything, your Bible reading? Well, that could be the reason why you're having the problem. And then, of course, the third, are you out in field service on a regular basis putting in good time? And so you could look around the audience, man. It was like 900 elders, right? And you could look around the audience, and everybody was like, you kidding, right? That's it. I mean, you could just feel in everybody's face like, man, you got to be joking. But that is the simple solution that they give for very complex problems. You mentioned that you are personally in the mental health field. Then I'm sure you must know, and I mean, someone like yourself, you must know very clearly the impact of what Jehovah's Witness children go through, how children in general are made fun of. Just, the old saying is, kids in school, kids can be cruel. I mean, everybody knows that. They pick at the guy with the Coke bottle glasses, or the little chubby boy. That just comes with the territory. And for the Jehovah's Witness, you now got layers and layers of additional stuff added on top of that. So I cannot imagine how the impact that from your profession, how that affects people long term. What do you think?
Well, when you're starting out as a child in this organization, and you have to go to school and be different, you can't celebrate or holidays with the rest of the class, or you can't go on certain field trips, or you have to just be different. That has a mental effect on kids. And all you keep hearing is, that's wrong for you to say that. You can't watch this on TV. You can't go to this movie. You can't do this. You can't do that. And for a kid to be told, if you do these things, you're going to be destroyed and your food makes a big. So that has a mental impact on kids. And that right there makes them either grow up and leave the organization, or they become troubled adults. And then when they're troubled adults, they're still sitting at the Kingdom Hall hearing all this information about what they can't do. It's not unusual for 90% of a meeting to hear what you shouldn't be doing, what you can't do. You see what I'm saying? So it affects the adults mentally too. I'll give you a good example. I asked someone if during the district assembly, if at each location they said, okay, the end of the system is not going like we want it. Let's speed it up. Let's drink this Kool-Aid with the cyanide. And they are so programmed that at least, I'm pretty sure, at least 20% would drink it because they're mentally programmed. They're programmed. They've been programmed. Some of them have been programmed since they've been born, that this is the only way. I was having a discussion with my mother earlier this year about some of the things that I've learned. And her first response is, well, where else you're going to go? Yep. Like if you're not a witness, then there's nothing else out there. And so that's programming.
Yeah.
And what they don't realize is that if you're programmed like that, you have mental health issues. Normal people don't believe half this stuff that's taught to you in the organization. So it's some programming and it's some mental health issues.
Yeah. And that was why my wife and I took our first class as psychology. We were very fortunate that we had some very good professors because we actually spent a lot of time talking to them just in general about, how this conditioning, how this works. One of the things that we were very impressed with was coming to an understanding of how correlations work. And that's one of the things that society has specialized in. And they'll take God and they will make the correlation that doing what we say do is the same as if God had told you to do it. And once a person crosses over that threshold, there's not much you can do with him. The Apostle Paul put it best. He said, there'll be people who will deliver you up and kill you and think they had done a service to God. And that basic principle is very, very true. Once an individual believes that his actions have been sanctioned by God, man, you can't stop nobody like that. The United States federal government found it out during World War II with the kamikazes. They were going to die for the emperor. And, they were going to fly them little planes right into them ships. There was nothing you could do. And so, like you said, witnesses demonstrate this with the blood. They demonstrate it with transplants, where they would die before they would do it.
Well, think about the mental health aspect of the members, where you have the governing body telling you that you shouldn't have independent or critical thinking. Let us think for you. And these members say, okay, think for us. And then you have the aspect of disfellowship and shunning. It's a powerful thing that makes a person say, I'm not going to ever speak to my parent or my child or my spouse because they don't believe the same things that I believe anymore, or they disfellowship. It's a very powerful mental health, issue, and that is mind control to the highest ability that you can think of.
Yeah, the congregation that we used to be affiliated with, there was a individual who she was a clinical psychologist, and one of the things that witnesses have always been told about is that you have to be very careful when you start seeking out therapists in terms of if the therapist starts pointing to your religion as a possible cause of some of your mental issues, you want to make sure that you leave. And that has been the society's basic position forever. Well, because this individual was a Jehovah's Witness, man, she handled cases, actually circuit overseers in different circuits would actually refer like young people or whoever, somebody who's having problems and they need to see a therapist because they felt it was better for them to travel down to Washington, D.C., where she's at, than to go to a local therapist because they knew that she wouldn't cross the line. And, of course, that was true. And one of the things that she participated in is that she also did child custody cases. She would do pro bono work. So if a witness and a non-witness were fighting over the child and the issue they was trying to fight in court was, the religion is impacting my child negatively, as a Jehovah's Witness and a clinical psychologist, she would testify in court that no, This is not the case at all. The child is well-mannered, well-balanced, and so forth. And she used to be my book study. I mean, we used to talk all the time. Just as nice as you can be. I mean, just the nicest person you want to meet. But and it just never dawned on her. And so she was actually used by the society. She was one of the society's point people out in the field. If a witness needed to talk to a psychologist, she was one. And that was what she did. And so the witness would never get the actual help they needed.
Well, about 6 years ago, I had 3 cases of kids under the age of 13 that their guardian, their mother or their grandmother, were witnesses. And I specifically asked for those cases when I saw them come across my desk. So these kids grew up in the organization. And when the elders found out that I was, working with these kids, they told me and their guardian not to let anybody else in the congregation know that they were working with me.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what path did you follow after college?
Well, after college, what happened was I went off to college and tried out for the football team and made the football team. So I played football for 3 years. And when I left college, I played a couple of years in Canada. And at this time, I was still, I was out in the world. And I had vowed never to step foot in another Kingdom Hall. I stopped going to the hall at 17 when my father said, you're old enough to decide for yourself, what you want to do. So I said, well, I'm not going anymore. So I never imagined that I would return. But what made me return is that I thought maybe, growing up in the organization, maybe I was missing something. Maybe I just wanted to go out here and be wild. So I gave it another chance, and like I said earlier to JT, the internet is powerful because back then I couldn't research stuff. But now, I could research stuff. So the teachings that I learned all my life, were turning up false. So that's when I decided to, make my exit. But from the age of 17 to the age of 40, I was, out in the world.
Oh, so you came back much later.
Right.
But then there had to be a turning point there. You lived almost 20 years, outside of the organization. And did you get married?
Yes, I got married when I was out in the world, and that didn't, work out too long. And so later on down the line, after I got baptized, I got remarried, and that's my current wife, who's was raised in the organization. And I kind of let, like I said, I wanted to give it another chance because I had my parents talking to me about this and that, and I just chalked it up to, I wasn't interested in the beginning because I was, young and wanted to experience life after being told no all my life. So the reason why I faded away now is different from when I stopped going as a teen. It's more now of the research, the things I found about the doctrines and all that stuff now, more so than, just getting out in the world and stretching my legs.
Generally speaking, if a person leaves for non-doctrinal reasons, fornication, adultery, they just want to go out and party, just have a good time. If people leave for those reasons, they typically will run into a wall when they get on the outside, because the reality is people in general don't live the partying life 24/7 like a witness think that they often do. And then they hit that hard wall of reality. And then at that point, they're like, I'm in trouble. I need to get myself together. And getting oneself together in the world of Jehovah's Witnesses means coming back to the Kingdom Hall. People.
Well, one thing that always throws me for a loop is, you hear people with a similar story of mine that's been out there in the world, and they'll come back, and then you hear them giving a talk or commenting, and they say, oh, it's so terrible out there, and I just had to come back in Jehovah's loving arms and all this. Well, I totally disagree. They must have been hanging out at the wrong places, because I had a ball out in the world. Satan is not going to make everything bad, or everybody would be coming into the organization. So you had to have, it's not going to be all bad out in the world.
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, that is this is what happens, because I've seen it. Generally, when a witness young person leaves, especially somebody's been brought up as a witness kid, when they go into the quote unquote the world, they engage in activities that even worldly kids don't engage in. And
right.
So they hit the bottom. I mean, the bottom. We've had people in our home and people we've talked to. For example, sisters. Sisters can't date. Can't have no boyfriend. Can't no boy call the house. So when they leave, I mean, I've had sisters say they were sleeping with any man who said hello. I'm gonna sleep with him because I can. Like one girl told us, she says, I can do whatever I want to do, which is true. And that is a true statement. You can do what you want to. It might not be good for you, but you can do what you want to do. And so Here you have a girl or a woman who's 25, 30 years old, and she's sleeping with every man who walks past her door. And yet she'll have people on her job she worked with, and they're like, no, I don't live that lifestyle. I'm in a meaningful relationship, and we're engaged to get married, and so they're not even doing that stuff. And so these people, when they go out there and they come back, that's the experiences they relate. The same thing with, you rarely see Jehovah's Witness kids leave and do what you guys did. That is rare. I'm serious, man. What you told me is rare. Most Jehovah's Witness kids who leave the organization do not go out and get degrees and become doctors and lawyers. Man, they just piddle paddle around. They do nothing. And so what they end up doing is becoming poster childs. They become the poster child as to why you shouldn't leave the organization, because their lives literally go to hell in a handbasket, as they say. And so the people that we met who left for doctrinal reasons, when they left the organization, they did not change their lives to debauchery. Like with us, man, I'm basically the same dude I was when I was going to King Hall Tuesday night and Thursday night. We ain't doing. I can tell you, we're not doing. We're not doing no sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That just ain't happening. And so instead, the first thing we did was we went back to school. We started trying to do a little investment and buy some property. And so we was trying to move forward, basically. But you will find that people who leave the organization, man, they hit dirt bottom. And it's because they leave for the wrong reason. Once you leave for doctrinal reasons, you realize, man, those guys was dictating every aspect of my life. That was crazy.
Right. And see, now as an adult, I can see things that I couldn't see growing up in the organization. And one thing that motivated me and my sister and I to go to college is we saw examples in different congregations where a person didn't go to college or didn't seek higher education. They listened to the message of just regular pioneer, go to trade school, work part-time. And so we saw the end results of that. We saw people struggling. We saw 40-year-old people, men still living at home. We saw, what happens when you buy into that, when you just want a regular pioneer and work part-time.
It's terrible.
So we didn't want any parts of that. And now you got people that's being sent home from Bethel that have been there, from 18 to now they're 50, and they don't have a resume. They don't have any education. They don't have nothing. They don't have, a home or vehicle or whatever. And now they're forced to leave or being laid off or whatever's going on, and they have nothing. They're looking up and they're 50 because they bought into that doctrine where, well, all you need is field service. All you need is to study your Watchtower and this publication and that. So my sister and I, we saw examples of that, so we never wanted to follow in that path.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. That is a very, very valid point. When I go back to North Carolina, where I'm from, man, I see all those brothers who quit their jobs. We had brothers there were brothers who had jobs where the society came out against having those types of jobs if they were going to continue to be elders and pioneers. And so they quit those jobs. I personally know two examples of two brothers who were in law enforcement. One was a state trooper, one was a game warden. And when the society came out and said that elders could not carry guns in their employment, the congregation was divided because that meant these brothers were elders. They would have to either step aside or quit their jobs. And both of these brothers, man, they decided, I'm keeping my job. And they were removed from their appointed position. And they were beat. I mean, they were beat on a regular basis. The beatings that these men took was just unreal. You know, through people's comments during the meetings, during elders' talks, during circuit overseers' visits. There's some of us who think we know more than Jehovah, and we decide that we're going to take the things of Egypt. You know, that kind of crazy stuff. Now, check this out. Check this out. Fast forward 30 years. 30, because this was back in the 70s. Fast forward 30 years. Both of these boys are retired, drawing over $100,000 a year, living in North Kakalaki, okay? And I've talked to both of these guys, and they're like, man, I'm so glad I kept my job, man. I'm so glad I kept my job.
Right.
And the brothers...
You can't tell people to leave jobs like that, and then in one breath tell them to leave jobs like that, but then you tell them, you know, you're supposed to take care of your family. I mean, which one is it?
Which one is it?
You know, quit a job as a police officer to, be a security guard? I mean, that's not going to work out too well. And
so both of them, I've talked to both of them. I mean, both of these guys are doing... they are enjoying their retirement. You contrast that to brothers I personally know back in North Carolina who quit their job. Because, see, man, we're talking about down south. You don't have a lot. When you get a state job, you don't really have a lot of choice in terms of, you know, secure jobs. And these guys, they went to these little cleaning jobs, cleaning banks at night and that kind of stuff. And that, you know, that just didn't pan out. Now these guys are like 60, 65, almost 70, and they're standing at Walmart greeting people. And you know, it's very, very sad. They will work to the day they die. And it's very, very sad that the society gets into people's personal lives to such an extent, and the decisions that people make and the suffering that people... Because the whole concept behind quitting your job and don't worry about it is basically based on the concept that the world's going to end real soon, and you can be good. You can be cool. You can be cool. You know, you just do it for a couple more years, man, and the program's going to be over with. The problem is, man, the program's been going on for 35, 40, 50 years. And now...
130.
130-some years, yeah. And so I remember, for example, things like retirement planning. Back when I was growing up, man, no brother would ever use the word Bob. You know, I met with this financial planner yesterday, and I was thinking about you. You know, would you like to talk to him? You know, he's helping me set up a retirement plan. Retirement? What's wrong with you? This system don't be here. And so, and so that type of mindset, man. Now these guys are paying a very severe price. But let me ask you this.
I'm 3 years away from retirement, and my mother recently said, "Why are you even thinking about that? You know, it's going to be the system probably won't last that long."
That's exactly right. The system's going to end. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I tell people all the time that the mindset of a Jehovah's Witness is that they cannot see more than 5 or 10 years out. That's the most that you can see. If you ask the average Jehovah's Witness, Brother Johnson, you way things are going, man, you think the system's going to last another 5, 10 years? No, man, way things looking now, no, ain't going to be able to make it another 5, 10 years. And so what happens is, after another 5 or 10 years go by, they just readjust. And you ask them the same question in 5 or 10 years, no, I don't think it's going to be able to make another 5, 10. In fact, we used to have a joke back home. We used to call, I don't know if you ever heard this, but back where I grew up at, they used to call it my Armageddon car. This thing gonna take me to Armageddon. Man, brothers done bought 10, 15 cars since then, you know?
Right. Well, what's going on now is that I was talking to someone earlier about, you know, I've been hearing most of my life about don't invest in this system. Or especially recently, you know, they're saying, you know, they were saying don't buy a new home. We're almost in the, you know, end of the system. Or don't do this with your money or whatever. But now you have this new building that they're building in, I think it's New Jersey, headquarters, and then my wife was telling me that they're going to start remodeling some of the Kingdom Halls. So if this system is so close to the end, why are we remodeling Kingdom Halls, and why are you building a new headquarters? Why not just use the old headquarters? And then you tell you're telling people not to invest in, don't buy a new car, brother. The system about to end. But then you have, remodeling, this and that and whatever. It just doesn't make any sense. And anybody with any common sense wouldn't be part of this organization, because it doesn't make sense if you really think about it and open your mind.
Now you see why we call our site critical thinking.
Right.
Because that's
everybody
something
doesn't have that.
We were never allowed to develop the ability to think critically or ask critical thinking questions. Anyone, in fact, if you go on my website, our website right now, there are people who will state on our website, critical thinking means that you're being critical of the society. That is their definition of critical thinking. And when you have people who their mind has been shaped and molded to the point where they actually believe a person who is a critical thinker means that this person criticizes the society, you're in trouble. You're in trouble.
Well, they say not only the society, but are you questioning Jehovah?
Absolutely.
When if you say anything that's out of order, out of line, then all of a sudden you're an apostate.
You are not allowed to question anything that the Watchtower writers publish in their journals. It's not really an accurate statement when people say Jehovah's Witnesses can't question anything, because you can question anything. You can ask any question you want to. Problem is, you better not question the answer. So, and that's why I came with that little, with that little phrase when I first saw it. I said, man, this is Jehovah's Witnesses all the way. And that is, I'd rather have questions I can't answer than answers I can't question. Because one of the things that people will often do is exactly what your mom did. Your mom asked you a very valid question. It was an excellent question. She said, so where are you going to go if you leave the organization? And that's a good question. I'll tell you, that's a real good question. And the answer for me is, well, I really don't know. But I do know this. I know where not to go.
Right.
It's
right.
like when you go out to dinner. It's like when you go out to dinner, man. Somebody said, what do you want to eat? And you're like, well, I don't know what I really got a taste for. And they're like, well, you want some crab? You want some frog legs? And you're like, no, I know I want that now. I might not know exactly what I want to eat tonight, but I definitely know I don't want no frog legs. And so that's the same way it is with the organization. Your mom asked a good question, but you see, that doesn't mean that sticking with the organization is where you want to go either. And that's the whole point. I know exactly what I don't want to do, and that is I don't want to be told by a group of guys who are just writers, man. I mean, when you start breaking this thing down, I've had this conversation with people, when you start breaking this thing down, man, it's almost sad. We basically follow a group of journalists, a group of writers, authors of books and magazines. The guys at Bethel do not claim that they're inspired. They don't claim that they're infallible. They don't claim that the magazines are inspired, and they don't claim that they're infallible. Yet we follow them as if they actually are. That's sad. That's sad. That is sad.
Well, I've heard people out in field service say about, a householder where, the householder say, well, my grandmother was a Baptist and my mother's a Baptist. That's why I'm a Baptist. And so the response is, well, you can break that cycle. Just read this Watchtower and Awake and you come to the meeting. But witnesses that grow up in the organization or later on in life come into the organization, they're following a cycle too.
Yep.
My friends are witnesses. My mother is a witness or whatever. And so somebody gave me this interesting point one time that witnesses should think about, instead of trying to change somebody from their current religion, what if somebody came to their door and said, hello, I'm a whatever, and tried to change them from being a witness? They wouldn't, be receptive to that in many cases.
Oh, that's
so
true. That's true.
why do they think that because you knock on somebody's door at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning that they're supposed to be receptive, and you're telling them everything they've learned is wrong? And I got the answer.
One of the best written articles, I tell people all the time, the society oftentimes writes very, very good articles. I mean, the guys in the writing department, they can put together some very well-written, very reasoned-out articles. Let me give you a perfect example. Young people ask, there's an Awake magazine is entitled something along the lines of, should I follow the religion of my parents? And in the article, it goes through all of the things that a young person should consider instead of just simply accepting their parents' religion. Now, here's the problem. It don't apply to Jehovah's Witness kids.
Right.
So they would give this magazine to some kid at the door. For example, one of the questions that I was taught to ask, and I think a lot of other witnesses were taught to ask, if a young person comes to the door, right, like underage, 13, 14, maybe 15, whatever, we would ask them, do your parents allow you to select your own reading material? Because, we don't want to give you a magazine if your parents don't want you to have it. And yet, if someone came to a witness's home and offered them, their children, some religious magazine, they'd throw that stuff right back out in the street.
Yeah, so it's straight from Satan.
So one of the things that makes the organization kind of interesting is that we have like these two sets of scales. One set of scale we apply to people who are not witnesses, and another set of rules we apply to people who are witnesses. And that's really one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest flaws when you start examining Jehovah's Witnesses' teachings that you'll find. The rules that they want people to apply to their religion, they would not allow their own members to apply to their religion.
Right.
We give examples.
But it's plenty in magazines. It's plenty in magazines, and you know this also, that for years, they will say, okay, the Catholic Church is dealing with this kind of, downfall or this situation. That's in the publications, the Watchtower, the Awake magazine.
Yep.
But as of today, I have yet to see on JW.org anything about child molestation cases or the Australian Commission or anything like that. But they're quick to point out the downfalls of other religions.
Nah. There's a lawyer, I think his name is Jeff Anderson. The Watchtower used to quote him in the Awake magazine when the Catholic Church child molestation cases first started. They was quoting him, because he's a top attorney. In fact, he's the one who actually broke the Boston Diocese. He hit those guys almost like $1 billion, man. They had to pay back, hundreds and hundreds of kids. Well, they're actually grown folks now, but it was the Boston Diocese where the church up in Boston, they had to start selling buildings and schools to cover the costs. Well, the society was so proud to quote Jeff Anderson in his cases that he was handling until Jeff Anderson turned his attention to the Watchtower.
Wow. Yeah.
So, it's that double standard, man, is just amazing, boy. But you have I tell you, man, it's good to talk to people who have made a decision, man, to think critically, ask critical thinking questions. And like I tell people, not only ask the critical thinking questions, but be willing to accept the answers. And sometimes the answers are hard.
Right.
I know when I first read Ray Francis' book, man, it just crushed me, because all of a sudden your world is just falling apart. I mean, you begin to realize that you was living in a house of cards, and it became so clear why the society don't want you examining anything, because if you start pulling one of the cards out, the rest of the things fall out, because everything is built on everything else. And now, man, with this little thing about the faithful and the discreet slave is just a governing body, oh man, that is just so sad. Oh man, that's
why they don't want independent thinking, and that's one of the signs of a cult. Like I said earlier, is self-contained. Now you can ask a witness, well, what do you think about this? And the first thing they'll say is, go to JW.org. Well, JW.org is going to tell you what they want you to believe. So
Yeah.
what's the purpose of me going researching on their website? They're not going to tell me anything different, than what they want me to believe. So that's defeating the purpose, to go research something that you have a question about on that website. And if they really want to make things interesting, my idea is make the Watchtower, instead of making it so uniform where you're just a robot and you read the, answer the questions that's already published or already printed, you just raise your hand and you can say any question, ask a question to the Watchtower conductor. Ask any question. They don't want that because that's not uniform, and then you catch people off guard.
Well, with the fine, outstanding men they got conducting the Watchtower, you wouldn't want to do that. No way.
Oh no, I wouldn't want to see them frustrated. When you
go around the world, man, there are elders. I remember talking to a guy in the service department. This guy's in charge of appointing circuit overseers, elders, pioneers, ministry of service before they kicked all that stuff down to the circuit overseer to do. And he was very point blank, man. He said the society know they got elders out there who ain't qualified, but they can get their friends out in service. They can organize good groups, good car groups, and that's why they're there. And you've seen that. I mean, everybody know elders who are like, he ain't qualified. Even by the society, and this is what's so funny about it, even by the society's own standard, the guy really ain't qualified. That's pretty bad, man. Even by their own standard, like, he ain't really an elder. And yet,
like you said, getting the groups out and stuff.
Yeah. Well,
taking the groups out. Everything is field service.
Oh, yeah. I tell people, man, you got to move the product, man. It's about moving the product. Right. You got to get the products moved. And that's
most of the time, they don't care they don't care most of the time if you've missed meetings for 3 months. Okay, where's your field service time?
Where's your time? That's what the elder you ain't been to the meeting, they ain't seen you, but that brother will call you at the end of the month, Sister Johnson, I'm just calling to see if you had any time for this month. I mean, that's just it's the way it is. And when you stand back and look at that, you're like, oh my goodness. We did a broadcast on why Jehovah's Witnesses count time, and we just did a little digging, man, about how the organization introduced the counting of time. Man, it's sad. I mean, the way they did it, man, they just made up stuff, and got God's name signed down at the bottom. That's all they did.
You know what's really sad is that after you leave the organization, and if you have especially family members, but friends also, it's sad when you see them still being mind controlled, still following that, those doctrines and everything. It's kind of sad, especially when they, like you said, everything is, the answer is, well, wait until the new system. It's just really sad. One of the things that really irked my family was when my grandmother passed, and the first thing came out of my mother's mouth is, well, we'll see her in the new system.
We'll see it in the new system.
Right. That's not the point. She could still be here if she had a pint of blood.
Yeah, no, isn't it amazing? Yeah, and that's what when you start bringing up witnesses who lost their lives, that's always the get out of jail free card, and that's where people. But I'm gonna tell you right now, it is harder to have a Bible study today than ever before. Because unlike years ago when your folks came in and my folks came in and Lady Cee's folks came in, the tools to do research on witnesses, man, is just tremendously. I had a fellow elder tell me once, we ran into them at Outback Steakhouse, and we were coming in, they was coming out. And we just chit-chatted for a few minutes, and he was saying, man, he said, we're having some problems with our young people, man. They're going up on the internet, man, they're starting to question the society, man. They're starting to question the society.
It's weird that you say that because I was telling Lady Cee on another conversation we had about how I noticed over the last 4 or 5 years that back when I was a teenager or you was a teenager, the assemblies were full of teenagers, more teenagers than adults. But now it's very rare when I see someone under the age of 20. It's like the young people nowadays are smarter than I was at that age, and they have access to the internet. They're not falling for that stuff. Right.
They're not.
Well, what you got to realize about these youngsters today is they have computers in their classrooms in school. And so the people that are our age now that are like gung-ho Jehovah's Witnesses that won't go on the Internet, they don't really want to ascribe to going onto the computer. They don't want to go on the computer, because they're fearful. They're afraid that they're going to get out here and get in trouble and, get onto some apostate sites and stuff like that. But these kids, they grew up with computers. That's why they're not going to be around, because when they're in their social studies class, their English class, their math class, and they have nothing else to do, they're probably on some of these apostate sites anyway.
Right.
Plus the difference.
Well, a lot of witnesses don't want to look on the Internet because of what the stuff they don't want to see the truth, and they're scared they're going to get online and research something and find out the truth.
Oh yeah, the fear is very. But that's one of the tools. That's why we did a thing on the fog, fear, obligation, and guilt, because fear is one of their greatest tools that keep people afraid. But unfortunately, man, they're having a hard time. Now, let me give you a perfect example. When you go on the Internet and you consider how many body of elders letters are posted on the Internet by elders and circuit overseers, I cannot imagine how the society down in the service department, those guys must feel when they will write up a letter, send it to a congregation, and within just a matter of days, man, this thing is available on the Internet for anybody, their cousin, Leroy, Pookie, anybody who wants to read what the Watchtower has told his elders to do in a letter. I mean, anybody can read that.
Well, that's how I got copies of the elders' manuals. That's how I got copies on the Internet.
The flock book, man. When I was growing up as a kid, I remember a friend of mine, his dad was an elder, and he was like forbidden to touch his dad's briefcase because within that briefcase, that was elder business.
Yeah, so what do you think about this new thing that's going on around on the Internet about the February 2017 Watchtower? About we're not inspired by Jehovah and we're infallible, not infallible.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. I think it's probably one of the best examples of how the society speaks out both sides of its mouth. What the society has done, I'm going to tell you, the guys in the writing department, they are good. And this is what we talk to our professors about, is how words have meaning and words are powerful. What the society has done is, think about college. You cannot find anywhere in any magazine where it says, thou shalt not go to college. You will not find anywhere where it says, the society says, you cannot go to college. It does not exist. What the society did, they did something much more brilliant. They created a culture where you don't want to go to college. And so you have young people who know better than to go to college. Everything that they do, they condemn college, they talk down on college, they poke fun at people who have degrees as being proud and arrogant, seeking riches and glory, don't want to work with their hands. The message about college is nothing but a drumbeat of negative. Yet they never said, don't go. They'll always use such phrases as mature ones, they so and so. Well, then, who don't want to be considered mature ones? I mean, tell me what Christian don't want to be considered mature. So they'll march out 4 or 5 young people on the platform, and they'll say, these young people have turned down scholarships. Are we not proud of them, brothers? And you have 13,000 people clapping hands. And if you have, like, non-witnesses, they're like, these folks crazy. These 4 kids just turned down scholarships to Harvard. They're crazy. But, see, in the world of Jehovah's Witnesses, that's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Now, if you are a young Jehovah's Witness child like I was, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and every year you go to the district center and you see them put on the platform people who are turning down going to college, and people are clapping, you begin to understand they have taken the correct choice in life. So after a while, when you reach a certain age, you don't need somebody telling you not to go to college. You already know this is not what I need to be doing. And that's what the society does. I make that point because that's what they did with the inspired issue. The writing department very skillfully does not use the word "we are inspired." Instead, they say "spirit directed," and they will fight you tooth and nail over the semantics of being inspired and spirit directed. What the society does, instead of using the actual word inspired, the articles will use the definition. Listen to me carefully. They will not use the word inspired, but they will write it up using the definition. So when you ask them, are you claiming that you were inspired? It didn't say, well, I was inspired, did it? No, it didn't say you was inspired, but that's what it means. What you just described to me is what that means. When the Watchtower says that this Watchtower contains no opinions of humans, then how do you get that? How do you have something that don't contain no human opinion? Only we can get that is inspired. When the Watchtower says, obey the faithful and discreet slave as you would the voice of God himself. Now, they just redefined who the faithful and discreet slave is. That's the 7 guys in New York City. So then what does that mean? That means you need to follow the 7 guys in New York City the same way you follow God. Yes, that's what they just said. But they didn't say that in writing. They said follow the faithful and discreet slave. And so they play these semantic word games. If you go as far as back as the 50s, man, the society has put in print, we don't claim to be inspired, we ain't infallible, we ain't inspired, but yet everything that they teach and everything that they put before you is as if you are to accept it as if it was. If someone says, if a journalist or a writer tells you that if you question what I have written and you are questioning God, then by definition, what am I claiming about my writings? Mm-hmm. They're inspired. But did I say they were inspired? No. And so the Watchtower is very good at playing this great semantic game, and that's basically what it is, because what's going to happen is a Jehovah's Witness is going to go up online, they're going to say, look here, in 1951, the society said the same thing that you just showed me in this magazine for February 15th, that we're not inspired. And see, this is why we have to watch y'all former Jehovah's Witnesses, because y'all go around telling lies. So if anyone out there is on this board and you are not a Jehovah's Witness, as you can see from right here, in 1951, the Watchtower said, we're not inspired. And yet these Jehovah's Witnesses are acting like this is some new fangled thing they didn't know. That's because they lie on us. And that's what, unfortunately, is what a lot of witnesses are doing now. Because if I was still a witness, I would laugh at that, man. I would actually laugh at every video I saw where people are acting like, man, look what they just said. Look what they just said. Because I would say, well, if you look back at if you had actually done your research as you claim you're doing, as you say you're encouraging people to do, you would have found that in 1950, the society was very clear. In fact, as far as back as 1911, Russell said the so-and-so, and it's actually in print. But like I said, what they do, they turn around. It's the same thing about an elder being appointed by Holy Spirit, okay? Mm-hmm. When elders jack up and do stuff wrong, well, he's just imperfect. But then when they want you to do something, he's appointed by Holy Spirit. A perfect example is teachings. When the society introduces a teaching, it is introduced with great fanfare. The faithful and discreet slaves, the governing body, God's channel. That's when they are introducing the teaching. When the wheels fall off and they get ready to throw that trash on the trash chute, what do they say? Some brothers. Some brothers.
Right,
some brothers.
just like 1975.
Yeah. Tell me who these some brothers are. I want to know who these some brothers are. And so,
right.
And so what
like
they
the
do.
1975 thing. We never
same
said
thing, man.
The world was, right.
Same thing, man. Before 1975, it was the faithful and discreet slave is keenly aware of where we are in the stream of time, and they're letting us know. We have 6 months to conduct Bible studies, brothers. Mm-hmm. And I remember brothers saying, brothers, why do you think the society is going to a 6-month Bible study? What is the message they're trying to tell us, brothers? How much more clear can this be? We can't be studying people.
Wasn't it a publication out in 74 that said, where are you going to be in 75?
Why are you looking forward to 1975? Now, most folks who weren't witnesses had no idea they was even supposed to be looking forward to 1975. Here the Watchtower comes off an article entitled, "Why Are You Looking Forward to 19?" I'm looking forward because the world's supposed to end.
Right.
Now check this out.
But if you ask anybody now, they'll say, "Well, we never said."
Oh, absolutely.
That it was going to end. Mm-hmm.
In 1975, mankind would have been on the earth for 6,000 years, making Adam's birthday 6,000 years, right? Jehovah's Witnesses don't even celebrate birthdays. So why are you so interested about when Adam was born, when Adam was created, or when his first day started, as well as Eve? Because that was the whole thing. If we only knew how long between Adam's creation and Eve's creation. And so all of a sudden, Jehovah's Witnesses are interested in the birthday. You don't even celebrate birthdays. And so that was the whole point behind it. And as I asked this guy once, I said, what is the biblical significance of 1975? Why was 75 more important biblically than 74? Why was mankind's birthday at 6,000 more important than 6,001 or 5,999? So what was it about 6,000 that Jehovah's Witnesses were so much involved in? It was the end of the world coming. That was the whole point. That was the whole basis of 75. And there are only two religions that even tied 75 to the end of the world. Hubert Armstrong of the Worldwide Church of God, he turned it over to his son, Garner Ted Armstrong, and Jehovah's Witnesses. They're the only two groups that was walking around talking about something's going to happen in 75. Only two groups. Right. Only two groups.
Then they ignore the scripture about false prophets, about anybody proclaiming to know the end of this system of things, consider a false prophet. They won't say that in the same sentence with 1975.
As I tell people all the time, the society tried to prove that Jesus was a liar. Jesus said that no man knows when. So the fact that you're sitting here trying to figure out when and come up with a date and you speculating and possibly it could be, you've already tried to defy Jesus Christ. Jesus says no man knows. So if you don't know, why are you sitting here messing with this stuff? Then that was the whole problem. And finally in 1980, I have a quote. It's from a yearbook. In 1980, at the district convention, the society, and the way they did this quote, man, is priceless. They did not make a statement from the society. They made a statement as if they interviewed people who had attended the convention. And the people who were being interviewed, they were asked, how did you enjoy the convention? And their response was, and I got the quote, that they were very impressed with the candor of the society in admitting responsibility for 1975. So it didn't come straight from the society. It was as if someone made the comment about the convention and how they enjoyed that during one of the talks, the society acknowledged it. So it wasn't even a straight comment. And so in that comment, they made the statement, the society accepted the responsibility for 1975. And so whenever someone starts telling me, we didn't say it, that's the first article I pull out. So let me show you what the yearbook 1980 says. It says right here, the society accepted responsibility. Responsibility means you're the one to be blamed for it. So don't be talking about some brother down in Mississippi and all that kind of stuff. No, don't do that. This came from the highest levels in your organization. And think about this, man. I mean, think about this. One of the things that Jehovah's Witnesses are very proud of, very, very proud, is that we do not permit false teachings. If a brother stands on the platform and begins to teach something that is not sanctioned by the society, he will be dealt with. I asked someone point blank, I says, how many elders, circuit overseers, pioneers, do you know who were removed because they was teaching something about 1975? Nobody. That's right. On Sunday, if a brother stood on the platform on Sunday and said Jesus Christ died on a cross, they will have him in the back room after the meeting. So what happened to all these elders and all these talks that these brothers were giving? Well, they was talking about the end gonna come in 75.
You think they'll wait till after the meeting to have him back there?
Yeah, you're right about that. They probably cut the mic off and bring him off stage.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and a lot of witnesses, these numbers that they come up with, nobody wants to acknowledge that these numbers, subtract this 7,000 from this one and this one. all that came from Charles Russell measuring pyramids.
Isn't it amazing?
You know, it's like Charles Taze Russell never existed. You ask a witness about that, they look at you like you're crazy. Who is that?
Who's that? They have this. They have this. Well, you know, they just took him out of the faithful and the street slave, man. You know, they just kicked my boy out. They just kicked him out.
Right.
They kicked out Peter.
They don't want to. Yeah. If you really want to see a dumbfounded look, ask them about Beth Surin, the house that Rutherford had in San Diego.
You get that deer in the headlight look, man.
Right. Yeah, and you tell them, yeah, he built that house for certain, Moses when he's resurrected and whatever, but he lived in that house most of the time. They don't even know the history of the organization they're part of.
No. Can you imagine, man, if you was working in the California deed office when the dude came in saying that he wanted to deed the house to Moses, Joshua, and those guys? Can you imagine the person standing behind the counter down at the clerk's office in the county clerk, and the Watchtower representative says, I want to post this deed, and so, well, whose name are you leaving it in? Moses, Joshua. Well, what's their last name, sir? Is this a son or a nephew or something? No, this is Moses and Joshua. What do you mean Moses and Joshua? Moses and Joshua. You talking about the Moses and Joshua in the Bible? Yes, ma'am. Let me check that right, sir. You want me to write this deed up that you're going to deed this house to Moses and Joshua? Can you imagine?
Well, knowing Rutherford's history, they probably just thought he was drunk again. He was an alcoholic and a womanizer.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I can't imagine how much that must have been the biggest joke down at the courthouse. Man, we had this dude from the Watchtower coming at that time. He's going to deed some land to Moses. Man, I mean,
the other brothers on the governing body fell for it.
Man, I know. Man, we got hoodwinked and bamboozled, man, so bad. I mean, and that's why, like you say, you look back at your parents, you look back at people who are still in, and that's why I tell people, you can't get mad at Jehovah's Witnesses. All you can do, man, is feel pity and feel sorry for them. I mean, they're walking around, man, with blinders on. I mean, it's so sad. I mean, it's really sad. That
was a great statement my mother gave me about, well, where else you going to go? And that's how I look at witnesses now. A lot of them think, well, where else am I going? But I compare that to a wife that's getting abused, getting beat by her husband. And everybody's telling her she needs to leave that situation. But she's saying, well, where else I'm going to live? Where else I'm going to go? Until it's too late. And, he kills her. So that's what this is. It's like they don't have anywhere else to go. They're not going anywhere. But it's going to be too late because the goalposts keep moving. So they're going to die a spiritual death. If you got to keep moving the goalposts, more and more people are going to start leaving.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think the saddest thing about it is the fact that they trick people into believing an end will come, and then these people have no money to live on later on in their lives. And then, a lot of people don't have children because they're told, oh, don't have kids in this system. So now you got older people who have no family to care for them when they get older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the people they're pushing out of Bethel that never had kids because they were in Bethel or, that, and now they're 50s and 60 years old, no family, no job history, no anything.
Right.
Very sad.
It's really sad.
Okay.
Well, we have definitely enjoyed it, man.
You guys call me anytime having these discussions. We don't have to do it on tape. We can just talk about it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And it's refreshing to know that I'm not by myself in thinking the way I think about the organization. It's real refreshing.
That's very important that the organization make people feel alone.
Right.
That is the whole reason behind the shunning, to make people feel alone. Right. This summer's convention highlighted that. The little girl who had left and went out into the street.
Yeah, I saw that video.
Yeah, she was made to feel alone, and that's the whole point. Make them feel alone, and they'll come back.
Right.
But what happens is, like with us, man, we left, and like my mom always said, when you leave the organization, you got to make a new client, get you a new clientele of friends, and then you won't need to go back. So.
Right. Well, and then if you shunning someone because they disfellowship, that's emotional blackmail. Most of the people that come back after being disfellowship, not coming back because they love Jehovah or love, being a witness. They coming back so they can have their family and their friends back. And exactly. I can't see Jehovah, wanting that kind of worship. It's like joining the mafia.
It is. You can't leave. Yeah. You can't leave intact.
Right. We're going to take your family if you do.
That's exactly right. And that's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's a very effective tool to keep people in check. Because your family is on the line at all times. And so that means you end up having to accept teachings and behavior that you find unacceptable. Well, we have definitely enjoyed talking to Wes today, getting an insight, especially from a professional standpoint, as the type of mental health issues and concerns that the type of culture that Jehovah's Witnesses, young people especially, find themselves in. And we're thankful to have such a professional on with us at this time. We have had an interesting evening. We look forward to doing this again. And Wes, thank you for coming on. And if there's anything we can do to help you, we appreciate that.
Okay, thank you for having me.
This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers.